Hi, I'm Mary Poplin, and today we're going to show you how to use the PixelChooser to create roto-masks inside of Avid Media Composer in order to isolate effects. You can use the PixelChooser for localized blurs or color corrections, for day for night shots, or to create cutouts so that you can put objects into a scene and make it fit seamlessly into the shot, like this title shot. The integrated mocha masking tools in BCC 10 can save Avid editors lots of time on masking projects. The first thing I'm going to do is show you what my clip looks like. What we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create a title effect on top of this clip. So I'm going to go to BCC 3D Objects, and inside of BCC 3D Objects I'm going to grab Title Studio. Now this is not a Title Studio demo, so I am not going to go over how to use Title Studio. We have all sorts of demos on that inside of the BCC fundamentals if you're interested in that. Workflow. In our Effects panel, we're going to launch the Title Studio UI. Now I'm simply going to open a project that I've previously created, car text. Alright, now that we've opened our file, you can see we've just done reflective 3D text and done a simple animation on top of our effect. Now all we have to do is apply our effect. And what you'll see is that our text is now applied to our shot. But how do we put the car back on top of the text? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new track. To create a new track, we right-click and select New Video Track. Now we can drag our footage right back to our timeline and make sure it lines up. From here, we select BCC Key and Blend. And then we select the BCC PixelChooser. This is now powered by Mocha. We'll simply drag that onto our timeline, and inside of the PixelChooser, we're going to go to PixelChooser Mask and Mocha. We're going to turn Shapes to Mocha Spline. Under Title Mat, we're going to launch Mocha. You may get a warning that says this host is not set to full resolution. Tracking at reduced resolution can be faster but less accurate. That means that it's going to use the Avid proxy mode to track. We don't want to do that. So we're going to come down here to the bottom left-hand corner to the Video Quality menu, and we're going to make this icon completely green by clicking it. Now when I launch Mocha, I will have no warning, and I can track and roto my shot. Let's talk about some of the controls that you need to know in order to use Mocha. First is your Pick tool. The Pick tool allows you to make selections. The next icon that you need to know is the Create X-Spline layer. Simply select Create X-Spline and draw a shape around a plane that you would like to track inside of Mocha. We have Beziers if you would like to use Beziers, but I don't like them as much, and here's why. Because with Beziers, I have to worry about two different points. With X-Splines, I can simply select my points and relax for a curve or pull tight for corners. And your Show Transform tool is used to manipulate your spline. Simply click and drag to select your points and manipulate your splines based on the Transform tool. The Transform tool allows you to have more natural-looking animation by allowing you to select multiple points at once and transform them all at the same time. Another tool you need to know about is the Surface tool. The Surface tool is the representation of your track inside of Mocha. You can align the Surface tool wherever you like in your shot as long as it corresponds to a plane. The Grid tool is a child of the Surface tool, and the Surface tool is a child of the track, which means your Surface tool will follow whatever your track is doing. So, if I were to go ahead and hit track forward on this, you'll notice that the Surface tool follows the front of this car, because that's what I'm tracking with planar data, and it doesn't matter if I move the spline, the track remains the same. It's important to note that the spline is where the track is looking, not how the track is animating. If you need a very accurate track, you should always turn the grid and surface on in order to check your track first. So what is planar data? It sounds like a buzzword. Now, planes sound like a buzzword, but they're exactly what you think they are. A plane is any flat surface having only two dimensions, such as a tabletop, a wall, or a television screen. Planes provide much more detail to the computer about an object's translation, rotation, and scaling than is possible with point-based tracking tools. Even as an object leaves and enters frame, there's usually enough information for the planar tracker to maintain a solid track of the object. When you work with the Mocha tools, you will need to look for planes in the clip. More specifically, you will need to locate planes that coincide with movements that you need to track. For this car, you can track the side of the car and the hood of the car. We're actually going to cheat and track both of these at the same time, but this only works because we're having a minimal movement in the shot. If I were to break this car into a bunch of different planes, those planes might look something like this. Think of how your object would look if it were a minimalist, cubist design, and that's about where your planes are going to be. You're going to pretend to be Picasso right now. Now I'm going to go ahead and go to my layer controls, and I'm going to double-click my layer and rename it to front car track. Your layer controls and layer properties are another important thing to know about inside of Mocha. The eye icon here is your visibility for your layer. If you turn your eye icon off, your layer spline and surface tools are no longer visible. The gear icon represents the layer being trackable. Once you are done tracking a layer, you want to turn the gear off, thereby making it to where you can no longer track this layer, using your track buttons right here. The lock icon locks your layer so that you can no longer affect it in any way. Layer properties are important because of link to track. Inside of link to track, if you make a new shape, if I were going to outline my headlights, for example, I can simply go to my layer, name this headlights, and in link to track, we link this to front car track. And now my headlights follow my track. These need some animation because the front of the car is actually curved, so I have to animate how those headlights change over time. That's very easy. I can simply take my transform tool and adjust the size of my shape, just like this. Now my headlights animate correctly throughout the shot. Let's talk about some of our track settings. When you track in Mocha, you always want to track from areas of the most detail to areas of the least detail. That is to say, when your object is the largest in frame, least blurry, and also the most parallel to the camera. If I were going to track the side of the car, it would not be wise to track from the end of the shot. Instead, I would want to track somewhere in the middle where I have a combination of all three of those parameters. You're never going to have the perfect set of parameters in order to track. So, let's simply draw around the side plane of our car using the X-spline, and let's talk about some of our settings in the Track tab. Minimum percent of pixels used you can think of in terms of your accuracy. The larger my shape, the smaller Mocha will make this number, because the amount of pixels I'm tracking is the accuracy of Mocha. Mocha will usually give you the best settings for minimum percent of pixels used, but if you find your track is slipping, you can simply click and drag in a clockwise rotation to increase your minimum percent of pixels used. For the motion that we track translation, scale, rotation, shear, and perspective, but not everybody knows when is it appropriate to track translation, scale, rotation, shear, or perspective. For this shot, if we were tracking the side of this car only, let's call this side car track, what we're going to do is we're going to track translation, which is how it's moving in X and Y, okay? Scale, which is pretty self-explanatory, how it's growing or shrinking. Rotation, also obvious, how is it rotating in the shot? But what messes people up is shear and perspective. What is shear and perspective? Shear is just a skew in X and Y, but X and Y only. So like a square becoming a diamond or a trapezoid. Perspective is actually that shift, but in Z space. So what that means is a door opening, a head turning, or this car turning to the side. So we're going to track perspective in this shot. Let's turn on large motion and let's hit track backwards. Now let's track forwards. The last two tools I want to talk about are Uber key and auto key. Auto key is on by default, and what auto key means is if I adjust my shape, Mocha will animate between whatever changes I make and the track. So it's using the track as the tween data and animating based on my movement of the shape. Uber key is something completely different. Uber key, if I turn that on, is a ripple edit. So whatever I do to my shape is a ripple edit throughout the scene. Once you're done with Uber key, it's really important to turn Uber key off. Trust me, I've frustrated myself many times doing that. So how do we roto this car then? I've already got a side car track. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a wheel shape. And because this is X-splines, I'm going to click and drag for a curved shape. I'm then going to use my Add to X-Spline tool. Add to X-Spline will actually add both of these splines onto the same layer. So now, both of my wheels are on the same layer, and let's call this wheels layer. Now I can take wheels layer, and in my layer properties, I can link this to sidecar track. And you can see I've got some correction I'm going to have to do. Let's turn my surface tool off and correct any bit of data on these wheels that I need to correct. Don't worry about shapes overlapping. That's actually the idea when we're doing rotoscoping inside of Mocha. What you don't want to do is try to track and roto the entire car at once. So there are my wheel shapes. Let's add the last wheel on the left. We're going to track this individually because it's on a different plane than the other wheels. And in layer properties, let's trim this layer. Now, my layer will not continue. Let's adjust our animation, and now our wheel moves behind our car and disappears. So let's show you an example of what you don't want to do. When I say that you do not want to track the entire car at once, what I mean is this. You don't ever want to make a shape in Mocha with Roto that looks like this, where we're drawing around the entire outside of the object. And let's show you why you don't want to do this. So let's say I tried to track all of this at once. Yeah, it'll track, but the track isn't very good, because what Mocha's doing is Mocha's looking at the bulk of the main motion and trying to match what the car is doing for all of the planes that are moving. That means one of the planes is going to be dominant. In this case, it's going to be the hood and the windshield and the front of the car. And that's going to drive the main motion, because Mocha actually will try to ignore information that is not part of the overall plane that it's trying to track. So with this, I would have to do actually a whole lot of hand animation. I don't like a lot of hand animation, so what I'm going to do is instead, I'm going to make new shapes for the entirety of the car. So I've got a front car track. Let's go ahead and rotor the front of this car, just like this. And it doesn't have to be super accurate, because what we're going to do is we're going to use another shape to roto the hood. Now I'm going to call this front roto, and we're going to link this to front car track. Now we simply animate wherever we need to in order to make this stick. Let's turn our wheels back on so we can see how these are overlapping. The next thing we need to do is we need to roto these side mirrors. I'm just going to let Mocha do that work for me. So I draw my shapes around my side mirrors. I call this right mirror, call this left mirror. And I'm not going to track translation, scale, rotation, shear, and perspective. I'm only going to track translation, scale, and shear because these shapes are so small. Now we simply correct the animation. We're only really concerned about correcting where the mirrors break the side plane of the car, just like that. Now, let's turn the tracks off for those and lock them. Now, let's track the front plane of this car. Well, the hood anyway. Now let's track the hood of this car. And now you can see how Mocha's doing most of my roto work for me because I'm splitting the shapes up intelligently. I'm going to call this hood and lock it. We're going to draw a nice side shape here. We're going to call this side roto. And we're going to link this again to the side car track and only correct it if we need to. And clearly we need to correct it here. I'm going to hit Command and shift this down and over and then pull these out. From here it's just a matter of correcting how my shape is moving. You want to work on the principles of animation, so squash and stretch. Try to make as few keyframes as possible. The less keyframes you make, the less your roto will do things like pop or jitter. So that looks really nice. The last thing we need to do is grab the roof of the car. So I'm simply going to draw a nice shape around here. And it's such a simple curve that we're actually just going to go ahead and let Mocha do this on its own by hitting Translation, Scale, Rotation, Shear, and Perspective, and tracking backwards. And there's very little correction I'm actually going to have to do for this. Select all of these points, just like this. And now my car is rotoed. From here you simply save Mocha and close it. If you remember, we selected Stencil Alpha, but you can see that it's only cut out over the car. So we go to the PixelChooser mask Mocha, and we invert the mask. Now our mask is applied to our effect. And that is how you use Mocha to apply an effect to a localized part of your footage. As an editor, this gives you way more control over the story than you would normally have using the basic tools inside of Avid. And because Mocha is so versatile and fast, it should cut your roto time in half. If you have any questions, I'm Mary Poplin with Boris Effects and Imagine Your Systems. Please visit our website and we will be happy to help you at www.boriseffects.com.